Well, thank you. This morning, we have heard some tremendously sage, practical advice, some very wise people sharing actionable, valuable insights. Every minute has been worth your time. I'm here as a change of pace. I want to do a little expectations management. The number of actionable insights you can expect from the next 12 minutes is 0. The number of useful case studies, 0. The anticipated impact in your productivity and social impact is below detectable levels. If you hear anything that sounds remotely like a learning, it means that something has gone horribly wrong and you should probably head immediately to the emergency exits. So I'm not going to deliver value, but what I will deliver is this, an apology. For about 25 years now, I've been helping organizations communicate digitally, and I've been promoting online engagement. And I've just been so excited about the possibilities of a digitally networked world. So excited that I might not have seen 1 or 2 pitfalls. I mean, connecting people in new and unexpected ways, opening up new avenues of self-expression and collaboration, this is really heady stuff. And most important of all, is that the nerds were finally going to be in control. 25 years after high school, the debating society and the chess club were finally going to put the football team in its place. We were going to upend hierarchies, bust silos. How did that turn out? Okay, so apparently some of those were load-bearing silos. You know Facebook's motto, move fast and break things? We broke a few things, like civil society. I'm sorry about that. We're working on building you a new one. Also, your way of doing business. It started off slowly. It started with word processors and merge files, a database of donors and volunteers instead of a paper list. And then it began to pick up steam. The email newsletters and the websites and the Howard Dean campaign, which was such a watershed, and suddenly email fundraising was happening everywhere, and widgets, and Skype. And through it all, in this blistering pace of change, you got the sense that it was building to something. And what it apparently was building to was social media. This amazing ability we had to translate our relationships into the online world and to start living and conversing there as just part of our way of life. It involved a lot of change, some of them wildly unexpected. Back in 2010, Beth Cantor and Alison Fine noted that social media was having an unexpected effect on nonprofits, and in particular on their supporters. It was a shift from lifelong donors and volunteers to people who wanted to engage on their own terms, what they called free agents. And they noticed that organizations were reacting in one of 2 ways. One was to hunker down, to shut people out, treat them essentially as consumers, go to broadcast only, and not let people in. The other way was to bring people in and start treating them like collaborators. And they called those nonprofits networked nonprofits. And that too was a heady time. It sounds all touchy-feely and kind of hollyhocky, but it means change. Deep change. Deep transformative change. And worst of all, the kind of deep transformative change that actually involves change. So enter digital transformation. You know how digital transformation works. Your nonprofit starts as a homely caterpillar, and then through a magical process of digital transformation, it goes through a change process and emerges as a beautiful digital butterfly. Yeah. When in reality, what happens is your nonprofit starts as a homely caterpillar, And then through the magic of digital transformation, it goes through a change process, and then it emerges as the same homely caterpillar with a Facebook page. So where does digital transformation go off the rails? Well, there are probably as many ways that can happen as there are organizations and consultants serving them, but there are a few big ones that I've seen. First of all, digital purely for its own sake. I have in my mind an agency that I call Winita Digital. Everything they do starts with somebody coming to them and saying, we need a Facebook page, or we need a Twitter account, or we need a crowdfunding platform. But without asking actually why. They're adopting new technologies and platforms because they're there, but they're not necessarily connecting it to purpose. They're doing it because everyone else is doing it, but not necessarily because it's right for them. And the funny thing is that sometimes everyone else is doing it can be an excellent reason to try something different. One way you know you're falling into that trap is when you can't answer the question what success looks like in a way that's at all meaningful in terms of outcomes that mean something to your sense of mission. The solution to it is actually pretty straightforward. You go back to basic principles. What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? And how are you going to do it? The second way I see things sometimes going a little awry is trying to take on too much at once. There are the projects that try to boil the ocean. They want to transform fundraising at the same time as they transform membership services, at the same time as they transform their online and advocacy efforts, and. Changing everything at once like that is a recipe for doing nothing well, for burning yourself out and burning your organization out on the whole idea of doing anything that ever involves electrons. Another way that things can go south is with a top-down approach. These are the projects that bring in new technologies without talking to the people those technologies are going to affect, without engaging in stakeholders or tapping into the wisdom of frontline workers, the people who rely on the services you deliver and the work you do, or the public at large. Honestly, I can't think of a better way to make sure that a project fails or isn't adopted or gets some passive-aggressive heel-dragging response than that kind of approach. Then there's just hiring the wrong vendor or consultant or buying the wrong service, being sold a bill of goods. I am seeing less and less of this these days. It used to be really big. I like to think the worst of it has shaken out and that the real snake oil dealers are either out of business or have moved all into Bitcoin. And then there's only changing digitally and thinking that because we've got the technology, that's all we actually have to do, whereas a lot of these things really involve major cultural and structural changes and changing systems, as well as changing the technologies they interact with. Organizations end up having to become less hierarchical, more nimble. All of those buzzwords in Wired turn out to actually mean something, to my absolute shock. The public has a new expectation of responsiveness on digital channels, and if you're going to start engaging with them there, then you have to be ready to do it. Then there's not being human. The ability to focus on metrics and spend your day looking at a dashboard is awfully seductive. But it can lure us away from the human impact and the conversations that make a lot of this so worthwhile, especially if we haven't chosen the right metrics or chosen metrics only because they're easy to measure. It is really easy when you fall into that to slip up, especially if you're faking personal connection and driving it algorithmically. And when you do slip up, and it happens, you need to have a willingness to kind of roll with it and to be human about that as well. This takes us back, I think, 7 years or so, but the Red Cross had an incident where their social media person tweeted out something personal on the American Red Cross account. The hashtag getting slizzard, I believe, trended. And for a very brief moment there, the American Red Cross was the world's leading pro-inebriation nonprofit. Their response was actually very human. They responded with a sense of humor. They ended up managing to turn it a little bit. There were a few ersatz fundraising or impromptu fundraising campaigns that they developed out of it. And I think they actually came out of it stronger and with a more human face in the organization. Finally, and this one is near and dear to my heart, it's the thinking that this stuff is free. Because so many of these services are free or freemium, thinking that there's actually no cost to them, when in reality, the amount of effort that you have to expend in actually making them work and not making them backfire can be really significant. I like to think that I wasn't guilty of this, but I know that from time to time, I and people like me erred on the side of, look, it's free, as in free puppies. And I know I had my moments. Training people takes a lot of work. Bringing people along with you takes a lot of work. It's one thing to actually put a new platform up and introduce a new technology. It's another thing to make sure that it's used and used well. Engaging people takes a lot of work. And the miracle of technology is it doesn't have to end when your workday does. Because all of us manage to take our organizations home with us in our handy-dandy little smartphones. When you go home at night, your workplace hitches a ride. Have you ever noticed that when you watch iPhone ads on TV, they're always ads where people aren't doing things like answering work emails at 11:45 at night? Everyone's capturing the birth of their child, or shooting skateboard videos, or capturing the birth of their child, or shooting photos of desert wildlife, or doing really fun school assignments, or capturing the birth of their third child. You never see people texting each other frantically about an all-hands meeting the next morning and saying, "Damn it, Marjorie, the kale danishes were your responsibility, frowny face, send." And the temptation to take on more is just constant. That FOMO hashtag is a very real thing. You want to see who is retweeting your tweet, or adding you on Snapchat, or loving your Instas, or connecting on Facebook, or liking you on LinkedIn, or following you on Flegma. It's impossible to keep up. For one thing, Flegma doesn't actually exist. I just made it up. But by the time I'm finished, it's entirely possible it will have launched with a $50 million valuation in seed money. For all of that, though, I think it's still more than worth it. I may have sounded a little hopeless, but far from it. I actually love the internet. I love what this networked age makes possible. I love what people do with it. And even the downsides of transformation can still be incredibly helpful. That need to be nimble means you're learning pretty quickly where the bottlenecks are in your organization and where people think they're on the same page but aren't. When you can't respond to a tweet within the same year, or when a deceased supporter is still getting 20 fundraising emails a day and everyone says that someone else is responsible, you know you have a problem that you have to drill down into. It's like doing a renovation, and where your contractor tears out some drywall and discovers you've got black mold. There's no papering that stuff over. You actually have to go in and clean it out. And by the same token, all that engagement that you have to work so hard to do means that you're deepening relationships and building new ones and hearing new perspectives that you otherwise wouldn't have. So there are a few directions that we can go in. And I said there wouldn't be any actionable insights. I lied. I do have one huge idea that I think is going to be the future for nonprofits. It's philanthropic ransomware. Where the message is, your files have been encrypted, donate 500 Bitcoin to the United Way of the Lower Mainland, or they will be deleted. Namaste. or we can go another way. There's just no getting around it. Digital transformation and digital disruption go hand in hand. So maybe it's time the nonprofit world returned the favor. I mean, the nonprofit world arguably created the web that we know today. And today, nonprofits are upholding the best values of the web. I think of the Mozilla Foundation, makers of that great browser Firefox, which at this very moment is powering 14 billion open tabs on my browser alone. And for all that we're told that the internet is about IPOs and valuations and Silicon Valley unicorns and using big data to manipulate people into handing over their money, we know that at its heart it isn't. It is about connecting people. It's about communication and collaboration, creation and co-creation. And nonprofits live at the intersection. So let's transform digital. And in the spirit of connection, please follow me on Flegma. Thank you.